Okay, back with Dr. G, Alexis Gonzales. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining again for another How I AI Clinician Edition.
Always happy to be here with you.
Awesome. So this week, I'm really excited for the theme that we're going to talk about around how to use AI to extend things like training staff and support for practice management. So I'll turn it to you. Tell us more about some of the exciting tools you're playing around with.
Yeah, so, this is a tool that I've been using since the beginning and we've mentioned, but haven't really highlighted its utility in this use case, which is NotebookLM, which is essentially, a database for you to add in materials, which can be PDFs, documents. You can connect it to your Google Drive. You can put in YouTube videos. And now it allows you to actually pull in other papers based on your topic. And so what has been really fun and exciting to actually apply this in practice management is you can help onboard new staff members on training modules, on concierge practices that you're creating in a very quick and accelerated way, where you dump all of these materials into NotebookLM. They then have the ability to chat with it and ask questions and clarify any points that they may have. You can also create training videos, training podcasts, briefing documents within seconds. So it's a really quick way for you to create all of these materials and provide it to your staff and allow them to then interact with it and engage with it without you actually having to take the one-on-one time to do so. So it's a huge time saving, huge cognitive savings as well.
Dig in for a second on more about what makes Notebook LM kind of different from just ChatGPT or some of these other tools. Why do you prefer Notebook LM for these use cases?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think of Notebook LM as, having a notebook or ChatGPT with tabs, and that it's kind of a closed system for all of the training materials that you would need it to constantly reference from. I find with ChatGPT that, as the further you get along in the chat, then you usually typically have to add back in the documents to remind it, or it'll sometimes get distracted as you start to pull in additional information. The Notebook LM stays fairly grounded. So what it's not good at is if you wanted to create, an SOP from the Notebook LM, it's not great at doing like tone and style type of copywriting, but for very grounded information and materials that are just from the sources you're giving it, Notebook LM is a really great.
Amazing. And I think what it's doing is a process called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, which makes it a lot more grounded and structured, to your point. So it's not, instead of generative AI tools like ChatGPT that are actually about generating, kind of, and being more creative and kind of taking more leeway on directions that you give it. The purpose of Notebook LM is to actually be, like you said, it's really grounding in specific knowledge bases and making these knowledge bases more accessible and, essentially being able to query it and all of that. So it's all structured around building your knowledge base and being able to really work with that knowledge base. So those are all great use cases for it. So let's dive in more on how walk us through this example of how you've used it for training staff, because I think it's such a useful, helpful thing. Like before, practice managers are, writing up tons of documentation, SOPs. Staff has to sit here, read through all of this, think about, kind of process it. So how have you found the processes improved with something like Notebook LM?
Yeah, I would think a really great example is, we're often bringing on new innovative technologies and brands and products, for example, such as an innovative stool test. And so what we would likely do is, build the SOP that we would ask all the staff to review. But what we also want them to do is we want them to speak to the test intelligently and competently, because the doctor is not the only point of contact for patients. It's the front desk staff, it's the nurse, it's the support team, it's the virtual MA. And so if everyone can kind of speak the same language around, the stool test that we're bringing on as the example, it makes for a much more cohesive experience versus always having to loop in the provider to answer those types of questions.
So great.
So what we would typically do is you add in all of the information about the stool test. You would add in your SOP about ordering. You might add in some very basic YouTube videos or podcasts that you would want the Notebook LM to pull from that would give them very foundational knowledge pieces to speak to the microbiome, or, training tutorials about how to actually complete the stool test, that then any person person that is part of your clinic can then ask questions about, read the training documents that you have, and allow them to kind of explore that information on their own time versus taking that
Nice.
face-to-face time to do so.
That's great. That's great. So it's a mix of like having, documentation that people can review in their own time, but then also really that step of like being able to ask questions or understand it from whatever lens it is that, that person's coming at it with. That's what NotebookLM is really good at doing. It allows you to kind of converse with the information in a way.
Yes. And, if you connect it to a Google Doc that is living and that you're updating the SOP as you're getting feedback from patients or staff about what's working or not working, it's not something that you then have to ask somebody to re-review, but that you could just dump into the notebook and it would automatically update. And they could just quickly ask like, hey, have there been any changes to the SOP recently? What do I now need to know about, onboarding a new patient to taking this test? So I think alleviates a lot of the question and answer and feedback cycle that happens when you bring on something new to a clinic and want to bring it on fairly quickly.
Great. So this could apply from whether it's tests like new tests like the a microbiome test, or things like rolling out new technology, or just other kinds of operational procedures like this. You could actually apply this NotebookLM workflow improvement to any of those things.
I mean, I definitely think so. I think it could be also practice programs that you're offering for your clinic. It could also be updates to certain concierge offerings that you're now offering to patients. So again, any type of material that you want the staff to speak to very competently and deeply, you could definitely dump in the NotebookLM and have it use as its kind of brain for how it's going to give you your staff. And I actually learned a ton. I always appreciate these conversations because the technological terms for what I'm trying to perceive from the output end. So I learned something new today about the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, I love it. Thanks for bringing such a fun new use case in. I'm sure a lot of people are going to, be inspired by this. I'm really excited to share this. And so appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Lexi.
Thank you.